the prosecution of Bradley Manning continues. His court-martial is, of course, proceeding. In June, they will be going to court. Today, Bradley Manning did something very unusual. He did what is called a naked plea, meaning that he did not reach a plea agreement with the prosecution. Nonetheless, he has agreed to plead guilty on some of the lesser charges. So he pled guilty to misusing classified material. Overall, it was 10 of the lesser charges that he pled guilty to, and he now faces a maximum of 20 years in prison because of that, because each of those charges carries a maximum of 2 years. Now, when he did this, he read a 35-page statement in court that he had written himself, and it appears that he did that because he's saying, look, this is the reality. I did it because I thought it would help the country, and it was me, and I did give it to WikiLeaks. But the 12 other charges, like aiding the enemy, are absurd. I didn't do that, and I will fight that. Now, as a strategy in the defense, I don't know. A lot of people are concerned. It's giving away some of your leverage in some way. On the other hand, Manning continues to be a man of tremendous principle. I don't know anybody else who comes in and says, look, I'm pleading to this because I did it. And it's not going to give me any advantage in my trial because the prosecution continues. It's not like they think, oh, well, he's being honest, so we'll let him off the hook. They don't care. The whole reason they're prosecuting him is because he was honest, right? And they're trying to set an example with him, so they're going to try, it appears, for a life sentence anyway. But the man, as usual, is true to his principles. And we found out some other interesting things from his testimony today. First of all, it turns out that he actually contacted the Washington Post and the New York Times and tried to give them the story first. So that's amazing. Neither of those papers were interested in what turned out to be one of the biggest stories of a generation. I mean, his story is so gigantic, they're trying to put this guy away for life, right? And they're doing an international manhunt, basically, on Julian Assange, because he did carry the story. That's how much the government cares about it. And the New York Times and the Washington Post were like, yeah, come on. And I'll tell you why in a second. But here's what The Guardian reports about his interaction with the Washington Post. Quote, he contacted the Washington Post and asked, would it be interested in receiving information that he said would be enormously important to the American people? And their answer was, not really. Now, why? Is it because they looked at the information, they were scared, etc.? No, 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 no. The person at the Washington Post said, I'll have to check with my senior editors and we'll get back to you, and was dismissive. The New York Times, he left voicemail messages, Skype messages on many different reporters, editors, etc. None of them even returned his call. Why? Because he's not an important person. You see, our media is so used to being fed information by the government that is pro-government, and it could be pro-Republican or pro-Democrat too, depending on who's leaking the information, that they view that that's the only legitimate source of information. Well, if I have a high esteemed government official give me a press release that is disguised as my, article, then of course I shall return his call immediately. Oh, this guy has a treasure trove of incredibly important government information that shows, for example, in the Apache helicopter video, that we murdered civilians, children, and reporters. We killed 2 Reuters reporters. You don't find that to be interesting news? No, it doesn't matter, because you're not an important person, and so I'm not going to take notes from you. I'm going to ignore your information. That is horrible reporting, horrible journalism. So that's why he had to go to WikiLeaks, because the WikiLeaks was only people in the journalism business at the time. The only people who actually cared about information that would expose what the government was doing. That's why the rest of the so-called journalists are so insanely jealous of Julian Assange and try to throw him under the bus at every opportunity. Okay, now why did Manning do it? Guardian continues to explain. Referring to the war logs from Iraq and Afghanistan, he said he felt they would reveal the true costs of war. Now, does that sound like a guy who's trying to aid the enemy? It sounds like a guy who's trying to aid the U.S. public in understanding the true cost of war so that we can make an informed decision. on whether we stay in Iraq, whether we stay in Afghanistan, so that we know what our government's actually doing. The amount of civilians we killed in Afghanistan, what we're doing diplomatically. And by the way, some of those diplomatic cables that he released changed the world. They were part of what led to the revolutions in Tunisia and Egypt. By the way, the New York Times and the Washington Post, oh, those world-changing documents, not that important, because you're not an important person who usually feeds me crap from the government. Bradley Manning explained in his own words, "We were obsessed with capturing and killing human targets on lists and ignoring goals and missions. I believed if the public, particularly the American public, could see this, it could spark a debate on the military and our foreign policy in general as it applied to Iraq and Afghanistan. It might cause society to reconsider the need to engage in counterterrorism while ignoring the human situation of the people we engaged with every day." You know who says something like that? A whistleblower. Not someone who's trying to help the enemy, someone who's trying to help us. He is the classic definition of a whistleblower. And he was right. We did kill those civilians in that helicopter attack. We did kill those reporters. We didn't report the number of civilians we had killed in Iraq and Afghanistan accurately. He was right about it all. And we would have been better off had we known that information earlier. We're better off knowing it now. And so is Tunisia, and so is Egypt, and so is the rest of the world. But for that in America, you do not get rewarded. You get sent to prison. So because of his own admissions, he's now facing a maximum of 20 years at least. But the government, in their great bloodlust here, to put away someone who's actually trying to help our democracy, says it's not enough. It's not enough. We want a life sentence. And the thing that they want most of all is they want to be able to connect Manning to Julian Assange so they can go get him too. Because we had a rare moment of journalism breakout here. And what happened is that we got to know what our government is actually doing in our so-called democracy. And that is what the government is livid about. That's why they want to punish Manning to the hilt, and that's why they want to go get Assange and try to put him away for life too. It's sick. We should all be against it, and we should free Bradley Manning as soon as humanly possible.